what I've started wanting to do is for unique conveyancing clients and potentially unique law clients in the future, we wanted to sort of get them to have the ability for people to see different aspects of the conveyancing transaction. Because as you know, nobody works alone in this transaction. There's always different people at different parts of it. So I really appreciate yourself coming in and providing an agent's perspective, especially an agent I trust from a vendor's perspective and definitely from a purchaser's perspective, which is really rare these days.
Thanks.
So if you want to just give us a bit of an introduction for yourself, etc.
Yeah, so Brad Pana, short for Panioto, which is a Greek surname. So yes, been in real estate since 2013. Most of my business is out in that Parramatta West region, so pretty much from Parramatta out. We'll taper inwards depending on the client, but we're very picky about that just because of time management. Specialise in houses, existing houses, units, but also development stuff. So spent a couple of years doing site acquisitions with a real estate office in Ryde. We put a few projects together. A lot of, especially with the strata title, where you've got those 50-year-old units that the zoning's changed over time. We put a few of those together, and then some land out this way towards Penrith area. We put a few acreage sites together, rather. So got that background as well as the residential background, but love real estate. It's all I do, and plan to be here.
Breathe.
Correct.
Nice. Straight into the veins, right? Yeah.
That's it.
Good ones. Okay. Well, thanks for coming out. Look, I had a couple of questions that I did shoot across to you, and I wanted to understand, and I wanted to share with everybody what is the current state of the market across some of the suburbs that you've been working in, and obviously, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I guess on the ground, like I mentioned before, we're definitely noticing units have taken a small hit, more so in terms of prices. There's still interest, but what we've noticed with this lockdown and this second kind of wave of COVID is there are definitely still buyers out there. I feel prior to the lockdown, we noticed the market had kind of started to taper. We saw some phenomenal growth come from January to March, May, that period we saw some tremendous growth, and then just prior to COVID we saw it starting to taper up. So the market seemed like it had kind of reached its new norm and it had plateaued. Then you come back to lockdown, and what we've noticed is it's kind of pre-qualified buyers for us, so we don't really get many neighbours just having a sneaky beak or buyers that are in the early stages. We're finding that the buyers that we've got are serious, they want to buy, and it's more so a factor of budget now. So whereas before it was like, oh, we don't really know if we're ready to buy, all of that's out the window. It's been pre-qualified by COVID and the lockdown again. So the buyers that we've got now, we are noticing are ready to go, but having said that, they're also eager. There's a lot more eagerness to kind of get in, especially prior to auction. A tactic that a lot of agents and self-included use is obviously going to auction, and the main reason is that it kind of sets a deadline, especially with what's happening locally and in Sydney. We're not sure what's going to happen a month from now with the lockdown, if everything's going to continue on, and we're going to see something like Melbourne where they are in lockdown for 3 months. So for us, putting a deadline on it gives us a goal to work towards, but also it gives the buyers a bit of a deadline to kind of get their stuff sorted, whether it's with their solicitor, with their brokers, whatever it is. But it's a deadline that we like to work towards. But we're a lot more open to selling prior to auction, whereas previously we probably wouldn't be more inclined. And I think that comes down to a couple of things. Maybe more so comfort with technology. Like our office is, I'd probably say, one of the top offices in terms of technology. We've got everything sorted in terms of online auctions and all that back end stuff. But it also comes down to the buyer comfort level. So as comfortable as we are with that technology, also understanding that when buyers particularly are comfortable, that's when you're going to get the best result working with them in terms of they're prepared to offer a little bit more or whatever. But we're finding that not all buyers are comfortable with the technology.
And me personally, with an IT background, I actually know from a security perspective, it's going to be very interesting because people have had to switch over to technology that they're not really familiar with. And then you couple that together with the actual contracts and some of the requirements of a contract to be in writing, for example, right? I know the revenue department has now waived it, but it's still there where you've got the tech factor and people are obviously going to be a little bit more apprehensive about that stuff. So it's good you guys are actually bringing them up to speed and you're also understanding of that.
100%. So our office called it real early. We implemented this probably about 6 months ago in terms of having everything ready in the back end, just in the event we kind of got into a second lockdown, which we did. So that's good foresight from our leaders. But like I said, I think the biggest thing for us is just touching back onto your question about the market. We're finding that it is a strong market. We're finding buyers are probably more eager to do deals now in anticipation to what happened previously, where COVID hit, market dropped by about 10-15%, and then slowly started to just go nuts leading into January. So I think buyers are predicting that's going to happen again. I'd probably be inclined to agree with them, but there is a chance it could happen again. So we're finding that buyers that are in the market today are prepared to pay a little bit more just to secure it.
Yeah, nice. Okay. So another question I had was, obviously the lockdown has affected numbers. You said that the market's sort of qualifying itself, which is really good. Now, with the legal side of things, have you come across any instances where the actual homeowner has been affected by COVID and they haven't been able to move out, or the purchase has been affected and so on and so forth?
Not really. We've kind of been blessed in that regard. We haven't really had any of our contacts or vendors or buyers or being affected that we're aware of. I guess the biggest issue that we're finding with COVID is just the uncertainty. So just tenants we are finding are a bit uneasy about it, whereas owners, they're a little bit more flexible. So if a property is owner occupied and they're selling, we've definitely got a lot more control there. Whereas if it's tenanted, we're finding that tenants, obviously from a legal point of view, we can't force them to provide access. Because if they do catch COVID because of an inspection we've done, there's just going to be hell. So from our point of view, we try and give them as much comfort in the fact that we're complying with the COVID safety guidelines. We've qualified our buyers, made sure that the buyers are coming through are not just tie kickers. Again, the market's assisted in that, but we still have a bit of homework to do in the background. But just giving our clients, our tenants, comfort in that sort of pocket. I don't know if that's the right word, but in terms of just giving them comfort in the process, we find is been amazing. But at the same time, I'd probably say about 60% of the ones that are leased, we've had a lot of tenants saying, no, unfortunately, we can't let you through.
Yeah, nice. Okay, well, so it's a high rate of tenants being more afraid than anything, because understandable. We also in our contracts do put a COVID clause. Most contracts have started doing it. I think the Law Society and even the Australian Institute of Conveyancers do recommend people put that in. It's not the vendor's fault, it's not the purchaser's fault. People are going to get caught up in the middle of it. We just have to follow the health orders, right? And I think above all, that will take precedence. And then people will have to be understanding if that does happen. But if those kind of things haven't been catered to, they can be quite a legal pickle. And then it'll have to be dealt with at a later point in time. Now, quick tips, the Brad Pana quick tips. How can a purchaser try and get ahead in this market?
I'd probably, I guess one of the tips I'd probably give buyers is to, if you are looking to buy in a pocket and you notice there's an agent that's fairly dominant in that location, I'll definitely recommend looking on their personal website as opposed to realestate.com and domain, because what you'll find is a lot of owners will kind of, especially in this market where it's a bit uncertain, will have everything ready, we're thinking of launching, but haven't launched to see what's happened, but they are on the agent's website, because we don't get charged to put on our own website, but realestate.com and domain charge exorbitant fees. So you'll find, depending on where you want to buy, I'd probably recommend looking on those local agents' websites just to see what they've got. And you'll find a lot of off-market. When we say off-market, it's stuff that isn't available publicly online. I guess the proper terminology would probably be pre-market opportunity. That's what they would call it, but you'll hear a lot of agents saying off-market. So that would probably be my best tip. Another thing I'd probably say to buyers is if it's a long-term purchase and you plan to be there for 10, 20 years, however long it is, but if it is a significant amount of time, I always kind of bring my clients back to say, if I could take you 10 years back in time and ask you for an extra 100,000, would you do it regardless of the property? And 9 out of 10 times they say yes. So that's something I'll bring up to them and say, guys, 10 years from now, especially if that's your plan to stay there for 10 years, it'll be the same answer. If you look forward 10 years and I pull you back and say, today, would you have paid an extra 100? The answer is probably going to be yes. So just giving that perspective on that, because we can often get caught up on $10,000, $20,000. And that sometimes can be the difference between buying the property and missing out on it. So I'd probably say negotiate with confidence. If you can afford to buy it, if you're happy with it and it's a long-term strategy for you, by all means go for it. Don't let the small, when I say small, $20,000, it's not small, but in the scheme of things, it is going to be a small amount that will limit you 10 years from now.
Okay, cool. Now, I think you touched on this before as well, but it is hard to sell a house with tenants, is it?
Correct.
Investor looking to sell a property, basically.
Correct. It definitely makes it a lot harder because like I said, we can't force the tenants to provide access. And we do get a lot of pushback, especially when the case numbers are as high as they are. We're in lockdown, we're limited and restricted. Whereas owner-occupiers, we've got a lot more flex. They can go to the park because it's mutually beneficial. It's beneficial for the owner to get out. Whereas for the tenant, they don't want to get out and then be told to leave in 90 days or 30 days when somebody else has bought it. So there's a lot of reluctance up front. What we try to do is something a little bit different, which I call a foundation meeting. We will actually set the foundations with the tenant from day dot. This is what you can expect from us. This is what we can expect from you. And just make sure that we let them know, yes, you are renting it, but it is your home. So we respect that fact. So by kind of setting the foundations straight from day dot, we find we do get a lot more tenants working with us, but at the same time, you're going to be nervous about things, and we can only give them so much comfort before they kind of say no, right?
Pull out altogether, yeah. So difficult, but not impossible. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, so vendors, how should vendors prepare for their best sale? Is there a bit of expectation management on your part? Is there, clean the house, simple little tips? What tip would you give a vendor?
Yeah, I guess in terms of, from a vendor's point of view, presentation is always going to be king. Regardless of the market you're in, presentation is king. So if it looks good, feels good, smells good, 9 out of 10 times, it is good, right? So I'll definitely say making sure your presentation's on point. Price is also important. Having a price guide is far more important than just saying auction or whatever it is. It's important to allow buyers to have the opportunity to kind of see if the property's within reach. And we've also got to remember, a guide is not necessarily what you'll take. It's kind of indicating this is where we'll start at or whatnot, depending on your strategy. But presentation, price, and then obviously, most importantly, your agent. So if you've got an agent that you select, that you trust, that's going to be key, because from my point of view, and I've said it to you many times, if you trust me and you're happy for me to give you honest feedback, whether it's positive or negative, you're going to be able to make an informed decision. So if your agent's not in a position to have those conversations with you, because it's not easy telling someone the buyer doesn't like this about your home and stuff, but at the same time, if we don't say it, it's going to have a negative effect on the sale price, but also our relationship at the end of the day.
Yeah, nice. Okay, cool. Now, two last questions before we wrap up. So, what's a common purchaser issue that you've seen during the whole process? What's something that you come across commonly, and you can tie into contracts, you can tie into the conveyancing side, which I believe that it often would.
Correct. I think it just comes, I've noticed a big thing for me is confidence and communication. So I find a lot of the times the purchaser will get stuck on, we'll be telling them one thing based on experience, and obviously they'll be getting a slightly different story from their solicitor or conveyancer. So I think that tends to be an issue sometimes, because we'll say, look, it's fine, we'll get it sorted, but solicitors say, no, don't do anything until it's all in writing, which we get. So that's one thing, but I guess it's all relative depending on the the deal at the time. Some buyers will be like, yep, we trust you, but that's the hardest thing too. So some agents will say 1,000 things and it'd be different. So I understand the solicitor's point of view. But I think it's the communication between the purchaser, solicitor, and the agent. I find sometimes if we don't establish enough of a rapport, it can get a bit sticky and it can cost the deal, just because the solicitor might not get along with the agent, and if we don't explain ourselves correctly and articulate what we're trying to do in a way that's going to give the solicitor confidence, they're not going to pass that on to the purchaser. So I think this communication with solicitors is important. I always try and make sure that we get along with our solicitors, whether they're vendors or purchasers. Solicitor, we try and get in touch with them early just to say, hey, if you need anything, please let me know. That's a point of difference, but that's where we find we get a bit of a hiccup. In terms of contracts, cooling off periods are always an issue. Some solicitors will request 10 business days up front. Some will be happy to give us 5, but it's all open to interpretation. So I think each deal is very different depending on the advice they get. So I think if you can find a solicitor that understands the process, is happy to reach out to us, because some solicitors won't even really talk to us. Like it's weird. So I like with Unique, you guys have been great. I remember the first time I ever dealt with you, and I was like, yeah, sweet. There's not going to be any issues here. And sure enough, we got it across the line, even though there was some hiccups on the vendor side of things with their solicitors and back and forth. But I truly believe having a good solicitor conveyance on your side just makes the process that much easier. Not just from us, because we are literally the middleman in the transaction, but having someone that's good and can communicate and not afraid to pick up and say, hey, Brad, what's going on? Can we do this? Can we do that? I think that's probably the reason why a lot of deals fall over, is just some solicitors aren't that involved, and that they don't have that much care involved for that purchaser. It's more of just a transaction. Contract.
And then from a legal standpoint, I think the biggest thing that and I know this will be a point of contention for many people to say, but usually it's a care for the client, care for the purchaser, right? We don't want to put them in a situation where they may not help me. They won't thank you in 5 years if that property that you bought ends up as a dud, right? So we tell them the worst case scenario. That sometimes we do go over, and I can say, like, I can speak for myself personally, where I've said, look, if a purchase is hard in it, I'll say, look, if you guys aren't 100% in it, then I don't want to take any part of this. So if you feel like you're not going to the supermarket to pick up a bag of potatoes, right? It's not that simple.
Correct.
And if you're not comfortable, in the very least, talk to somebody about it. You've got a cooling off period for that reason. And they usually 80% of times, 90% of times will say, oh, my solicitor told me to pull out of the contract. And then I get an annoyed call from the agent saying, hey mate, why didn't you like that property? I'm like, I'm not the one living in it. So but yeah, you're absolutely right. If there is something that can be done, it should be done. And yeah, it's good to have a team that you can actually work with as well.
100%. And that's what I mean. It's really important to have, because we'll work with that many solicitors and conveyancers weekly. Like, I'd probably say about 5 or 6 different ones at any one time individually. So for us, it's important to try to establish some sort of rapport, because if the solicitor is comfortable with us, whether they're representing the buyer or the vendor, the whole transaction's just going to flow that much better. So and I think, I can speak highly of, obviously, you guys have been great on multiple transactions. So and I have dealt with other solicitors and conveyancers where I've kind of gone, what's going on? And even the buyers have called me and said, I haven't heard from my solicitor in 2 weeks. And I'm like, but it calls off today. What do you mean?
That's the favorite call. Hey guys, last day of the cooling off, we haven't heard from you. Oh, let me get in touch. Hang on, I need to request an extension. I'm like, oh god.
Exactly.
So another question. So that was from the purchaser's perspective. What's a common vendor issue that you see during the conveyancing process? And
there's again, it always varies from deals or transactions and to transaction. I think one thing we're noticing a little bit more and more is with the rent back period. So because there's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace, a lot of our clients are putting a rent back period in their contracts, and then buyers are saying, hang on, what's this? I want to move in. And so there's a lot of to and fro in that regard that we're noticing. But I guess it also comes down to the contract itself. So there's a lot of special conditions and stuff where the owners don't actually have any idea that that's actually in there, just because they haven't had that communication with their solicitor. So I think it's, the biggest thing would probably be, in my opinion, at present, would be like things where they've been added to the contract without the vendor kind of knowing about it. So hang on, I don't need the deposit released or whatever it is. And that's been contingent for that purchaser to proceed. And then obviously just like stuff like rent back, where it's a requirement for the vendor because of the uncertain times. And that does limit our buyer pool, because some buyers need to get in ASAP. So it comes down to just seeing if we can either work around that in some sort of form.
Nice. Okay. A lot of that stuff, especially the thing about the we do have special conditions that we'd have to put into the contract to protect the vendor, even if they don't realize it.
Correct.
The biggest key for us, and I guess you guys will get the same, is instructions. We need written instructions generally, so that we are very clear, there's no ambiguity, because then if we don't, we'd rather protect the vendor in case that sort of stuff happens.
Correct.
And it always comes back to the vendor saying, okay, well, actually, I don't need it anymore. And if the purchaser's representative is, astute enough to pick it up, they'll send some queries and say, can you clarify, or can you, amend this? And we get back to the vendor and explain it and get rid of it. And
exactly.
But okay, that's interesting. That is a good issue, and it's good for me personally having this chat as well, because I can see what the other foot, the other shoe, right? So I know what I can look out for specifically. And I think that's it really. And I appreciate your time. Do you have any questions specifically for me? Just a general question, anything in terms from a legal perspective?
No, mate, not really. Like I always tend to bring it up on the day, or when
when it comes up.
Correct. But I guess in terms of one thing I'll also kind of prep buyers with is, and kind of remind them, is like agents, yes, we work for the owner, but at the same time we're humans. We're here to obviously help you buy your dream home. But a lot of times what will happen in a transaction, I've noticed from experience, is because we're the middleman, we often get left out of a lot of correspondence. So there'll be a lot of things agreed to and requested prior to us actually knowing about it. So I'll always say to any buyers, once we've actually signed contracts, I'll say, look, if there is anything major that you'd like change, with an extension of the calling off period, a 5% deposit, whatever it is, let me know up front. Let me know why, so that at least I can speak to the vendor and give them context. Because solicitors will naturally just say, we need this and this, and not always, but sometimes there won't be context behind it. And the other side will be like, no, we don't agree. Whereas if we prep, correct. Whereas if we prep the vendors, give them some context behind it, this is the reasoning behind it, it's reasonable. Yeah, 9 out of 10 times we get it agreed to. So that's probably one thing that'll tie into the tip side of things for purchasers. It's just to have a good relationship and bring up anything early with your agent that's representing your purchase, just so that they're always in the loop, because I find that's where a lot of things go wrong. And then the vendor might be also, well, why are they trying to delay settlement, and takes it personally, and the buyer's like, well, why are they declining it? So that's where we butt heads. Whereas if we just say, look, they've sold this, they just need an extra 2 weeks. Oh yeah, that's reasonable. All right, sweet.
Well, that expectation management, right? And a lot of this actually speaks to you more as an agent than it does to anything else, because a lot of agents don't consider that. The minute a sticky question comes up from a purchaser, they'll say, go speak to your representative, go speak to your conveyancer, go speak to your solicitor. And whereas what we try to do is we say, look, I will request that from the other side. However, prime the agent so they can go directly speak to the vendor and get the vendor ready, right? And that makes more sense, because it's all about expectation management. I wouldn't want to be surprised somebody wanted a 10-week settlement period and then I found out at the last minute, right?
Correct. And like I said, context is the most important part. So it's not that it's not okay to request that extra time or that 5%. It's more so just understanding why and the story behind it, to give the vendor confidence that, okay, sweet, we've still got a deal here. They're not nervous or going to pull out, because people tend to build up the worst picture in their heads of what's going to happen. So I think getting in nice and early, let us have that conversation with the vendors on your behalf. Once we've got a verbal agreement, then we'll request it in writing and give you the go ahead, and then it's done.
Good one. All right, where are you off to next?
Winston Hills, yes, just an off-market property which we should get away. Off-market, this one's proper off-market in the sense that no photos, nothing has been done. It's just our database. So fingers crossed.
Obviously, the contract of sale has been done, right?
Correct. Correct. So agency agreement and contract of sale in hand. The rest is in there.
Plausible deniability, love it. Man, thank you so much for your time, and again, appreciate your good work. And I'm sure I'll be on the phone with you later as well.
Awesome. Thanks,
Brad.
Your time too. I appreciate it.
Take care, man.
Take care. Bye, usual.
Bye.